the name of the God who loves us. Amen. Friends, it is such a wonderful thing to get to be with you at convention. And before I say another word, I have to say thank you, Bishop Stokes. I know many of you just call him Chip, but I'm an old school Episcopalian. Even though I've been a bishop for 5 minutes, I look at another bishop and say, Bishop and last name. That's how I was raised in our church. But I want to say thank you to Bishop Stokes for inviting me to be a part of your convention. And especially to be right at the very beginning. That is quite a joy and honor. And there are parts to my joy. One is the incredible sense of joy and gladness and love and hopefulness that comes to you from your northern cousins and relatives and companions on the journey in the Diocese of Newark. They are so excited for you and so excited for what God is going to do visiting you here at convention. So there is that piece of joy. And then there is the piece of joy of getting me outside my Newark bubble. I have been there for about 5 months now, and people say to me all the time, oh, you must get into New York. You must just be moving all over the place, seeing all kinds of things. I don't see nothing. I spend all of my time in my diocese. And part of the time, again, I'm an old school Episcopalian, I'm trying to get the job done right. But also, there's just so much to learn. And probably the hardest part to learn is how to deal with New Jersey drivers. I gotta say, I mean, it is genuinely a different part of the world and a different group of people. And what is it that you guys have against left turns? I mean, seriously, just turn left. It's okay. The world will not fall apart. So thank you for letting me get to come and be a part of this with you. There is this other piece of joy that is really important to me and I think important to all of us. And that is, we are the members of a small denomination. I mean, I think we're all that. I think we are a big deal. But to most people, I have to spell Episcopalian. And then I have to explain what it is and what it means, because it sounds very extraterrestrial to a number of folks. We come together for events like this, when we come together for convention, when we come together with all of that diversity that we are, and all kinds of diversity. You know, our tendency is when we hear that, we immediately think race. But there's all kinds of diversity. Diversity economically, diversity in terms of our education, in terms of our age, in terms of our experience of what church is, and in New Jersey, in terms of geography. That whole urban, suburban, rural thing is a little bit of a mind bender. How different church is in all of those different areas. But when we come together amidst all of that, suddenly we're not a little bitty church anymore. We become something that's much bigger. We become this wider community. We become this little people that is powerful, that can change their piece of the world. We might not be changing the entire world, but we can change our piece of the world. And that's the power of sitting in this room. I can't help it, but there is the part of me. Look at how many people are in here. Don't you just want that? I think there I am, back again. We can't help but see what happens when this many of us get together and sing, and this many of us get together and pray, and this many of us get together and hope and dream and think about what it is God is trying to do among us. We stop again being itty-bitty, but we start being mighty. For wonderful thing to have this passage that we have today with disciples that we can count on always to teach us something about ourselves, something about who we are as people. And we've got James and John who just kind of let me go, these guys, they were rabid for Jesus. Jesus said, come and follow me, and they just got in the way. Didn't ask any questions. Weren't worried about consequences. Just took off, following him. And after all of that time with him, after hearing, this is the third of the stories about what Jerusalem is going to be like, where Jesus is trying to explain to them something hard is getting ready to happen. Even after hearing all of those, when they come to him and say, Teacher, we want you to do whatever you ask of us, there's a part of ourselves in that question. You know, as long as I have been praying for people, and I've been in the Episcopal Church all of my life, and I've been active all of my life. I'm a second career clergy person, but I have always been all in our church. And I've been praying for people, probably laying my hands and praying on people, praying for them since my 20s. I did the kind of, in church, hear the words, praying up until that point. But it's an interesting thing when you put your hands on somebody and it's you and Jesus and that person, and the Holy Spirit is bringing you the words. And as many times as I have prayed with people in those situations, not one single person has ever said, pray for God to give me just a little peace. You just pray a 10% prayer. You just ask God to take care a little bit of what's going on with me. Everybody wants the whole thing. Everybody wants Jesus. Do for me what I'm asking of you. That's who we are. We are exactly like those disciples. Do whatever it is I'm asking of you. And when they do ask, and what they ask for is prominence in eternity. Prominence in eternity. Seriously? I hear that. I don't know about you. You're probably holier than I am. I hear that and I say, immature. Prominence in eternity? I'm wondering, is there anybody here that has a question to ask Jesus about or wants Jesus to answer a prayer the way they're asking for it? Are any of us asking for prominence in eternity? Most have real things that we're praying about. I'm wondering, is there anybody other than me that's worried about the state of the planet? That is on my list. Help us snap out of it. Answer this prayer the way I am asking you to answer this prayer. Is there anybody here that's worried about violence? Or terror, or sexual abuse, or hatred? Jesus, answer this prayer the way we are asking for it. Do what we are asking you to do. I'm wondering, this is totally selfish. Is there anybody who is worried about their family? Or have prayers for somebody in your neighborhood? Or at work? Or the people that we hear about halfway across the world? Jesus, do what it is we are asking you to do. And then blessing, the incredible blessing that Jesus answers them saying, Jerusalem is going to be hard. To go to the cross is going to be hard. And I don't know that you can face that. He does not make them look stupid or feel stupid or tell them that they're wrong. But he does, in essence, say, transformation is going to be hard. It is good. It is right. And it is what Jesus asks us to do, to come with our prayers. To come asking for those things that we need. And then our expectation needs to go back to what he tells the disciples and what he tells us. Because there is a lifeline here. And the lifeline is, we are meant to be great. I know, it sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? But this is the plan. That we are meant to live into the greatness that God has for us. And that greatness means being a servant. Now, of course, there had to be that little trick. Greatness means being a servant. I will confess my sins right now. I am a terrible servant. I am a firstborn, over-functioning child. I have been telling people what to do all of my life. The first one came along when I was 15 months old. And I've been bossing people ever since. And most of us, on some level, regardless of birth order, like being in charge of our piece of the world. And when we're in charge and we're in control, it is hard to put ourselves second. It is hard to go to Jerusalem. It is hard to go to Jesus. It is hard to be transformed by the living God. It means we're going to have to give up some things. Control being one of them. Determining the outcome being one of them. Always having the answer being one of them. I started life in the hotel business, and people very often will talk to me about hospitality business and how much the church can learn from them. And I just shake my head. Everything about the hospitality business comes from Bethlehem. There is always room in the inn. Always. I'm not kidding you. This is how we think in the hotel industry. Everything that they learned in the hotel industry, they learned from the faith community. And we forget who we are. And to be a servant is something I found over the years that people either are or they are not. And sometimes a circumstance can so affect you that you are willing to serve a person or people or a situation. We are so transformed by seeing God in another person or seeing God's movement in a situation that we are transformed. I had the great pleasure of knowing Steve when he was homeless. He had lost everything. I mean everything. He had a career in the medical professions. He was a doctor. He had a family, wife, and a small child, a home in Westchester County, and he lost all of it to an addiction to cocaine. It was the 80s. That was the drug then. He moved down to New York City and lived on the streets and took as much dope as he could in order to forget who he was. And he made his way into a church. I don't want to make it sound like church people went out on the street and found him. That is not what happened. It was cold. There was a 5 o'clock service, and he made his way into that 5 o'clock service so he could stay warm for a couple of hours. And the interesting thing, when I talked to him years later about it, what got him to come back was not that the people were so nice and warm and wonderful and everybody got to know his name. It was that the person sitting next to him at the peace shook his hand. It had been so long since he had touched anybody that he was struck at how it felt to hold somebody's hand, even for a minute. Now, I happen to know the person who shook his hand, who said it was the hardest thing he ever did. He felt like there was a war going on inside of his spirit. Shake his hand, you're sitting with him, you're right next to church, he's homeless. What might he have on him? He's not clean, he smells. I can't wash my hands. Communion is right after this. My hands will be dirty. You should shake his hand. He's a child of God. But that whole war went on inside of him until he just finally said, Jesus, help me. And said, peace be with you, brother. And put his hand out. This kind of thing went on with Steve in that church for years. There isn't a complete happy ending. He had acquired HIV, living on the streets and sharing needles. So he died much younger than anyone expected him to die. And the story is long. I can't go into all the pieces of it. But I can say, because so many people were transformed by the cross, because so many people went to Jerusalem with him, they stopped shaking his hand at the peace, and they started hugging him at the peace. Because you hug people that you love. You can tolerate someone and shake their hand. But people that you love, you can't help but hug them. Because you're so happy to see them. And years after the fact, after I left New York City and left that church, I remember hearing about how Steve was on the vestry. And I thought, it's an amazing world. And what a cruel punishment. He loved being on the vestry. He loved everything that that meant. Everything that it symbolized. And that he was at the center of the life of that church. I bring his story up for a reason. Because I know how important discipleship is to you. I know you are doing all that you can to follow Jesus and to help others follow Jesus. And on some level, we're trying to get it right. We're trying to be great. We're trying to make sure that we do exactly that thing that God has given us to do. And I think it's important for us to remember right now, at a time where the mortality rate for most white people in this country and certainly in the state of New Jersey, has shortened over the last 3 years due to death by suicide and drug death. That the person that we might serve, the person that we might disciple, might be somebody like Steve. We might actually be a part of their learning to live again. And not just learning to live, but choosing to live. There is a life and death battle going on right now. And about the only way to win it is to allow ourselves to be transformed by the cross so that we can be those people who serve. I don't know if we'll ever be great, but I have this picture in my mind of what might happen when we reach the heavenly country. And all those lives that we touched, all those people who chose to live, greet us in celebration as we greet them in joy. Jesus, we ask you to do whatever it is we want from you. And Jesus says, yes, follow me. Amen.